Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock and I'm just going to wait a few more seconds and then we will get started. Okay. Welcome to everyone as we're collecting our last people joining into the Zoom. We're very happy to have you. I want to give people time to get through the process of joining in, but we also have a lot to share with you today, so this is exciting. All right, so welcome and thank you so much for joining us. This is the Sarasota County Water Quality Virtual Update. I am Lee Hayes Byron. I'm the director of Sarasota County IFAS Extension and Sustainability. We're a partnership between Sarasota County and University of Florida. And I've got a lot of great speakers joining me today. This is a follow-up to the Water Quality Summit, which was held in 2019, and also a similar virtual update that we did last year. We want to keep our community updated on this important issue and have a regular opportunity to answer your questions. Next slide. So this is our plan for this afternoon. We're going to start with opening remarks from Commissioner Cutzinger, and then John Thaxton is going to discuss the community playbook for clean waterways. Dave Tomasco will share the state of Sarasota Bay, and I'm going to share information from the Coastal and Heartland National Estuary Partnership. And finally, we're going to end with several updates on county water quality initiatives and ideas of what you can do to make a difference. Next slide. Our speakers are listed here and their bios are available on our website at scgov.net/waterquality. They represent both community partners like Gulf Coast Community Foundation and Sarasota Bay Estuary Program, as well as county commissioner and county and extension employees. Next slide. We've got a really good program for you today with a lot of great information to share. But first, a few logistics. We welcome your questions. That's the main reason we're doing this today. So throughout the event, please write them in the question and answer box, which you should see Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. And we will stop after each of the sections, which will be 3 times during the webinar, to answer your questions. Also, we have enabled closed captioning. So if that is helpful for you, you can turn that on by clicking the button at the bottom of your screen. Finally, these slides and a recording of this webinar will be added to our website at scgov.net/waterquality after the event. So you don't need to worry about scrambling to take notes or capturing all the web links. We'll make sure that you have this information as well. We will email all the attendees when that's available on the website. So let's get started. Next slide. Our first speaker is County Commissioner Ron Cutzinger, representing District 5. Thank you so much for joining us today, Commissioner.
All right, glad to be here. Thank you, Lee Hayes, for this. This is a great opportunity, and I look forward to hearing from all these experts. So again, thank you for inviting me. I did want to take a minute to talk about the hurricane, the challenges we're still facing. I just got word this morning that we surpassed 3 million cubic yards of debris collection, which is, to give you some perspective, about 10 times what we did for all of Irma. So you can imagine the impact that's had on our community. And I think one of the things it's shown us is how important it is to deal with stormwater, how it's affected our bays, our estuaries, and how vulnerable that is. So I think this is a great time to really look at water quality and what we can do to help improve that. One of the things I wanted to share is how your county commission is dedicated to working on water quality issues. A few things I wrote down that we've moved forward on just in the past couple of years, some major projects. In fact, I'll start with the conversion to advanced wastewater treatment. We made the commitment to convert all of our plants to advanced wastewater treatment. And it is the largest single project ever undertaken by Sarasota County. It's going to be several $100 million. And we actually began construction on the Bee Ridge plant, and we're in design on the other plants now. So we're moving forward on getting that done. And it's going to make a huge difference. Really want to thank John Thaxton, Steve Swaw, and Gulf Coast Community Foundation for the work they've done. And he'll be sharing some of that with you in a few minutes. The work they've done on the community playbook. It really showed us where we need to put our priorities and where we need to focus our efforts to have the greatest impact. And we saw that that was really the place to focus to begin with. Made a lot of sense. And so we've committed to that. We just recently went through an update to our stormwater regulations. Great work Amanda Boone and her staff and her folks are doing. Her team, I should say, are doing. Looking at impervious area and being a little more equitable about how that's being charged to different folks. And that's going to make a difference too, because again, what we're trying to do is make sure that in all these areas, we're doing the best possible job we can to deal with stormwater. Utility updates that we've done, inflow and infiltration. You know, some of these facilities are older. We get leakage, we get infiltration of stormwater into our plants, and we really want to avoid that. So we're moving forward on that. We just passed an updated regulation regarding that, and we're moving forward on it. And then also we're doing a comprehensive review on septic to sewer, and appreciate our utilities department, Mike Milat and his team have done kind of an initial survey, and they're doing a review of that and looking at, again, what that's going to be like. And that's going to be a many years project and a lot of dollars. But again, we're committed to moving forward in all these areas. And again, putting our priorities where it will have the best impact. And then I think too, something that gets overlooked is the environmental protection that we have here in Sarasota County. Some great projects that we're working on, the Alligator Creek restoration, the Donna Bay project, and many others. And I think about the Bay Park project, downtown Sarasota, what an improvement that is to our stormwater. So just a few things that we're working on as your county commission. We're committed to that. I love water. We moved here in 1973. One of the reasons we moved here is because we just love the Gulf. We love our bays. We love our estuaries. My family was born and raised here. Our boys grew up on the water. As soon as they were old enough, they were all certified to scuba dive, and I'm a certified diver, and we've been offshore countless times. I love the water so much, it just permeates everything about me. Even my golf balls love the water. I started my last round of golf that I played with a dozen golf balls, and they all ended up in the water. So there's something about me that just is drawn to water. And, it's so important to me that we're just focused on doing all we can. Water's it's our golden ticket. It's the lifeblood of our community. And we need to be faithful stewards of that. I'm a financial advisor, and I call myself a fiduciary. I really have a level of trust that I have with folks because I'm managing one of the most important assets that they have. Well, the same thing is true regarding our water. We need to be fiduciaries. It's a wonderful trust that has been given to us, and we need to do all we can to make a difference and be focused on really, really having the best water quality that we can. So thank you for coming. It's going to be a great time to learn about water quality, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, for those remarks and for the Commission's commitment to this issue.
Thank you, Lisa.
Our next speaker is John Thaxton. He's Senior Vice President for Community Investment for Gulf Coast Community Foundation. Thank you for joining us and taking the time today, John.
You're very welcome, Lee Hayes. And let me see if I can start my video. Yes, there we go. So let me get all these things out of the way here. And just kind of as a warning, I am suffering the continued effects of a flu that I had 2 weeks ago. And so if I cough, I apologize, but it just doesn't want to seem to go away. And I can go ahead on to the second slide now, Lee Hayes. And I'm going to thank everyone's interest in water quality. This is one of those issues where it really does take a community to make lasting and impactful success. Presently, I am at a Restore America's Estuaries Summit here in New Orleans, Louisiana, and we're sharing a lot of the ideas that we have learned in Sarasota and learning from other communities about the ideas that they have for improving water quality. And specifically here, Jennifer and David Schaefer and I are promoting the water quality playbook that continues to receive a lot of attention. We're now celebrating our second year. It's been 2 years since the playbook was first published, and it continues to exceed our expectations in terms of drawing the community together with common goals and vision for improvements to water quality. And I would suggest to, if you haven't visited the site recently, to check back with it from time to time, because we do continue to update it with the most current information available. Many of the things that Commissioner Cutzinger just talked about with regards to the revisions to the stormwater ordinance and the AWT treatment, et cetera, we keep the playbook current there so that the information is still relevant to all of our work. Can I go to the second slide? So normally when we discuss water quality, as the Commissioner just alluded to, or discussing the playbook, we talk in terms of how our waterways defines our way of life here in Sarasota as a community. You know, we associate links with social and recreational and economic attributes and amenities. And we even gauge our success with all of these different measurements, such as total chlorophyll, dissolved oxygen, nutrient levels, seagrass coverage. We even designed economic models to estimate the economic impact of clean waterways versus degraded waterways in our community. But I wanted to leave you with just kind of a little different spin on water quality, one that we don't think of very often. I've recently been spending a lot of time with the National Academy of Science and the Gulf Resiliency Board. And there we're talking about things that they're calling compound disasters, areas in water quality and other natural events, and go to the next slide, that disproportionately impact the working poor and the working families in our communities. So I wanted to take this opportunity to remind us all of this absolutely critical, but often overlooked and underplayed outcome of the work that we're doing in water quality. And that's improving the working lives, the education lives, and the family lives of these individuals that contribute so much to the quality of life that we often overlook. So as we're going through Dave Tomasco and others, and we start talking about our chlorophyll levels, and we start talking about our seagrass coverage, et cetera, I want everyone to put a human face on the work that we're doing. And remember that we're speaking for so many in our community that really don't have the voice or the time to speak for themselves. So water quality is a lot more than just about seagrasses and manatees. As important as seagrasses and manatees are, they are about the economic viability of many of our working families in this community. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to remind us all of this all-important benefit of the work that we are doing. So I appreciate the invitation, and I will stay on and make myself as available as possible. So thank you, Lee Hayes. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, John. That's a really important perspective on the impact of this issue for everyone in our community. Next is Dave Tomasco, who is Director of Sarasota Bay Estuary Program. Dave, we really look forward to hearing the latest news on the state of our bay.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And without going into too much detail, exactly what John said. When we talk to the public about the state of the bay, we talk about quality of life, we talk about jobs, economic value of the bay, before we even start talking about that, because that is important. I've raised my family enjoying Tampa Bay, Sarasota Bay, and the Gulf of Mexico as well. So that's where we start off with. So if I can have the first slide, please. Oh, I apologize. This is the second slide, but that's perfect. That's a great place to start. So one of the things is this is a water quality summit, but managing the Sarasota Bay means managing nitrogen. And the way to determine the health of Sarasota Bay, you have to do more than what the state of Florida or the feds tell you to do, which is just sample the water quality. Well, this graphic kind of shows what happens when you increase nutrient loads into a place like Sarasota Bay. It makes greener water, which is what we call phytoplankton, but also affects all these other things. Can you click on the next one, please? So there's this relationship between there's more algae and not everything fits into a water bottle. And yet the only thing you have to report on to come up with a report card is the things that fit in a water bottle. So us and our partners, Sarasota County, Manatee County, Moat, FWC, and volunteers, we collect data on everything. We quantify the amount of algae that's in the water, the amount of nutrients in the water. We work with the Water Management District to map out the amount of seagrass, and we also have FWC monitoring the amount of fish. We use volunteers to figure out how much algae is growing on the bottom of the bay, not something you find in a water bottle. So we collect all this information and we use it to provide ourselves with enough information for a report card. Next slide, please. So our report card is based on 4 metrics. 2 things that are in the water, the amount of nitrogen in the water and the amount of chlorophyll, which is an indicator of how much floating microscopic algae you have. But then we also include the amount of macroalgae, the stuff that you don't find unless you dive into the water and actually quantify it. And we do that with volunteers. And the amount of seagrass. So we have 4 metrics for each of these 5 bay segments, Palmasola Bay, Sarasota, and then the 3 lower bay segments. And we actually reference, we have a reference period as well, because that's important for us for target setting. We don't know what Sarasota Bay was like 100 years ago. We don't know it was like 50 years ago. We have water quality data, but we don't have good data on the amount of algae. We don't have good data on the fisheries, for example. So we use nitrogen, chlorophyll, the amount of macroalgae, and the amount of seagrass, and we go back to 2006 to 2012. That's our reference period, and we're comfortable with that because during that time period, not that long ago, we had lower amounts of nitrogen in the water, we had lower amounts of chlorophyll in the water, we had less macroalgae, and we had a 28% increase in seagrass coverage. Those are all indicating to us it was a healthier bay. So report card compares each bay segment against itself during that healthy period. And then we take the results and we color code it. We color code it because that's kind of like what we want to do. We don't want people to fixate on 3.7 versus 2.9. We want them to know the general pattern. And we color code it so that blues and greens represent pretty good conditions. Yellow is caution and red means stop what you're doing, something's going wrong. So here's our report card. You can see across the board, 2006, 2012, it's mostly greens and blues because it was a healthier bay not that long ago, 10, 15 years ago. This was a healthier bay. Palmasola Bay, it's kind of cool. Palmasola Bay tells us that it's still a healthy system and how Palmasola Bay has developed and the way that like stormwater is treated can help us a lot to kind of replicate, for example, those sort of things in other parts of the bay. The upper part of the bay was doing pretty good until 2017, 2018, when it shifts into yellow. And we think that's due to like 3 things, really. The 2016 red tide, 2017 Hurricane Irma, and the 2018 red tide, which was about 10 times as strong as the 2016 red tide. And that 2018 was unique for a couple of things. It was the worst water quality across the system, but also, one of the neat things about 2018 was it actually had the greatest amount of wastewater overflows and a huge amount of rainfall in May. If we look at the lower bay, we shift into the yellow back in 2013. Can't blame that on like an El Nino. We think that's kind of like the beginning of the problems that we had in terms of wastewater overflows that have now been mostly fixed. Next slide, please. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to manage the bay by managing nutrient loads. And the first thing we have to figure out is what do we have to do? So what we've decided is like it makes sense to get back to the nutrient load we had when this was a healthier bay. And that means we need to reduce our nutrient loads by about 20% or 12 tons. So can we find 12 tons? And the answer is yes. Next slide, please. We have more than enough we can act upon. Spills and overflows, reclaimed water, septic tanks, stormwater. If we include all of that, there's more than enough. We're not going to be 100% efficient at removing things, but if we make a big amount of action on all of those things, we're going to be able to get back to the load we had when it was a healthier bay, and we're going to be able to, we believe, hold the line on population growth in the next 30 years. This is all good news. Next slide, please. However, every once in a while, we're going to have things like Ian. This is a photo that was taken in August of 2022 during the wet season, and then the weekend after Ian made landfall in Wednesday. And this is Blackburn Bay, the lower part of the bay. Next slide, please. So when that happened, we actually went out and we coordinated with Charlotte County, Charlotte Harbor NEP, Water Management District, and a couple of other state agencies. We started collecting water quality data out in the bay, 3 stations at each of the 3 bay segments, visited 3 times. And so what I'm showing on the left-hand side is the amount of bacteria in the bay, and that red line is the never to exceed value for class 3 marine waters. And what you can see is that in the middle of Blackburn Bay, for at least 2 weeks, the bacteria levels were too high for fishable, swimmable designation. And that was in the middle of the bay. It was much worse along the shoreline and in the creeks. The slide on the right-hand side shows the amount of algae that was actually in the system. And that is, how green was the water. The water was so dark with tannins, it was kind of hard to see there was actually green as well. And we had elevated levels of algae in the water for at least 2 weeks, but by the time we get to 4 weeks, we actually started to come back. So how bad was the bay? It was pretty bad for about 2 weeks. And then by the time we got to 4 weeks, it got better. Next slide. Why so much algae in the bay? Because so much nitrogen was loaded. All the wastewater overflows, stormwater, all the grass clippings and dog poop and over-fertilized lawns gets washed into the bay. And this shows the relationship between algae on the y-axis going up and down, and the x-axis was nitrogen. And the neat thing here is exponential relationship. So if your nitrogen doubles, for example, from 0.6 to 1.2, the amount of algae doesn't double, it goes up 4-fold. So that's why we pay so much attention to nitrogen from stormwater and wastewater and that sort of thing. Next one, please. So last slide before the final tie-up is, one of the reasons why Sarasota Bay got better is because we exchanged our water to the Gulf of Mexico. And that's kind of like not a perfect way to get better. So what we have here is satellite imagery 1 week before Ian came through, 1 week after Ian came through, and then 8 weeks after Ian, which was actually last week. And so the satellite imagery shows in yellows and oranges and reds, red tide basically. And so what happened is we pushed a lot of this nutrient out into the Gulf of Mexico. Humans don't cause red tide, we can cause it to be worse. So Sarasota Bay getting better by tidal exchange actually probably helped to create a red tide that was bigger than it would have been without the impacts that we had from Hurricane Ian. And last slide, please. What we really like to stress to people is, which future do you want? Picture on the left is from Sarasota Bay. This is around Bird Key Park, and this was taken actually in the beginning of the wet season. Picture on the right is Indian River Lagoon. So the imagery that John Thaxton is talking about, like how important healthy water is to the economy, absolutely. How'd you like to try to make a living as a waiter, waitress, or restaurant owner on a waterfront business if you had the water quality on the right, which is where they are in the Indian River Lagoon right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave, so much for that helpful update. Now, our county is really fortunate because we're supported by 2 national estuary programs. The Coastal and Heartland National Estuary Partnership covers the southern part of our county. Unfortunately, their staff are currently out of town at a conference, but they provided slides for me to present so we can give you a full view of the state of our county's full set of watersheds. Next slide. So the CHNEP area covers over 5,000 square miles that you can see here. Their work focuses on both the coastal communities as well as the inland areas because actions all along these waterways have impacts in the estuaries. Next slide. The counties, cities, and agencies that make up the CHNEP focus on 4 priority action areas of water quality improvement, hydrologic restoration, fish, wildlife, and habitat protection, and public engagement. Next slide. How do they measure waterway health? It's similar to what Dave just talked about that SBEP does. The nutrient and bacteria levels in the water, the health of species such as seagrass and shellfish, and the growth or overgrowth of algae. While all of the waterways in the southern area of our county are unique, there's some general trends that have included that the seagrass experienced some of the largest recorded declines between 2018 and 2020. And there was also an overabundance of algae at that time. We've started to see some recovery since then, but we need to work to protect and restore our waters in every way that we can so that they can be more resilient in the face of future impacts. Next slide. As was just mentioned, the impacts from Hurricane Ian Ian were particularly difficult and more significant in the southern part of the county. It led to unprecedented amounts of bacteria and nutrient pollution entering our waterways. There were sewer and septic system failures, bacteria levels above limits in the week following the storm. In November, again, those high concentrations of red tide started to show up. Next slide. These impacts can be seen on the coastal conditions mapper, which is on the CHNEP water atlas that you see here. In response to the hurricane, the staff from both estuary programs and many other partners created a water quality task force, and they continued to collect water quality data despite the really difficult circumstances that they were facing in the waterways. The data will be included in long-term analysis to learn from the impacts of the event and inform the recovery efforts. Next slide. A recent report from Colusa Waterkeeper rated counties in the CHNEP region from 1 to 9, with 1 being the most concerning. The analysis found that Sarasota County was rated 6 out of 9, which was one of the better counties overall. The next few slides will share some information on water quality in specific estuaries within southern Sarasota County. Next slide. Donna and Roberts Bays are located in Venice. These bays are deemed impaired for nutrients as well as mercury in fish tissues, according to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. The chart on the bottom demonstrates average nitrogen in the region compared to the regulatory thresholds, and the map on the right shows red arrows demonstrating an increasing trend in total nitrogen in those bays. Next slide. These images show seagrass trends, which were relatively stable until 2018 when large losses occurred. Some data in 2021 indicated a potential recovery was starting, but we'll have to see later this year what the impact of Hurricane Ian might be on that. Next slide. Lemon Bay extends from South Venice to Gasparilla Sound. It is impaired in the same ways as Donna and Roberts Bays, but with the addition of bacteria. This chart shows the nitrogen in the water here has routinely exceeded regulatory standards, but Upper Lemon Bay has been improving recently, as you can see from the green arrows on the map on the right pointing down. Next slide. Seagrass here has been relatively stable, but it started to decline in 2016, and algae density has also increased in Lemon Bay over the last decade. Next slide. An example of CHNEP's collaborations within Sarasota County is the water quality monitoring and the data that are available on the Water Atlas. Many of the images you've seen in the slides have been from that so far in the presentation. Next slide. CHNEP funding has also been used for a number of wetland restoration projects in Sarasota County along the Myakka River. These projects are done in partnership with nonprofits and counties and state and federal agencies. Next slide. CHNEP also worked to create a master habitat restoration needs plan for the region. It compiled all the existing habitat plans and integrates climate science to identify the areas in most critical need for protection. Next slide. So the CHNEP is really a true partnership across a really large region, and you can find more information about their work at chnep.org. And I just wanted to thank them for developing this presentation and sharing, even though they couldn't be here to join us today. Next slide. So this is our first point at which we want to stop and take a minute to see if we have any questions for our first set of speakers. Jackie, do you have anything for us?
Yes, I have one question from the audience so far, and for anybody who has questions, just go ahead and click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and you can ask your questions there. So from Stephanie, we have the following. Minnesota Key is surrounded by Lemon Bay to the east and the Gulf of Mexico to the west. As a resident of Minnesota Key, I have seen continued degradation of water quality on both bodies of water over the past decade. The seagrass and manatee populations have all but disappeared, and we suffer chronic red tide and fish kills. What actions are currently being taken to preserve and restore water quality around Minnesota Key? I believe most residents of Minnesota Key would be willing to participate in a Key-wide pilot project to restore water quality around the Key, including seagrass restoration, manatee rehabilitation, and restoration and red tide mitigation, etc. So the question is, what actions are currently being taken to preserve and restore water quality around Minnesota Key?
Thank you for the question. So because CHNEP staff aren't here to answer and actually react to those good suggestions, we're going to share your question with them. And I will say that I think the actions will be something that we get to in the next section where we talk about countywide efforts, including some regional efforts in Southern Sarasota County. So I will make sure to do that and get CHNEP the information you shared and get them connected with you for more information. Does anyone else have other thoughts specifically about Minnesota Key?
Lee Hayes, this
Yeah.
is Dave. I think that individual will see that there's quite a bit of action, and this is outside of our watershed. But you know, the stormwater projects that are going to be like undertaken for the Alligator Creek watershed should benefit the upper part of Lemon Bay, and also as Sarasota County moves forward with Venice Gardens wastewater upgrades, there should be some benefits there. So I think there's hope on the horizon for at least upper part of Lemon Bay in terms of all the things that Sarasota County is doing for stormwater and wastewater that are already being initiated.
And Lee Hayes, I would also add that there, as a part of the Inglewood CRA, there are a lot of water quality improvements that are planned associated with those activities that will take previously untreated stormwater and treat it before it gets into that portion of Lemon Bay. So I think, like Dave said, I think there's really a lot going on in that area. It's just like many of our Bay waters, it's just going to require some patience for these policies to turn into actions and for the actions to turn into measurable water quality improvements.
Thank you both. Those are really good additions.
All right, I have another question that came in. So the question's from Joe, and it reads, do impact fees from development help pay for the improvements that the commissioner spoke of?
Can I see if our planning and development services representative is able to answer that?
Hi, this is Rachel. That's a great question. I would probably have to refer to some of the projects that have been constructed with the impact fee funds to determine how those might relate to water quality. It might be something I could report back to similarly, as Lee Hayes has indicated she would do, because I have not personally been involved with those projects, but there still may be a good connection there.
Lee Hayes, not to hog the conversation, but I can kind of respond to this one as well. I've spent a large part of my career on impact fees, and impact fees can only be used for capital improvements that are necessary to accommodate the new growth that is being charged the fee. So to the extent, for instance, like in the AWT plant improvements that Commissioner Cutzinger talked about, to the extent that new growth is creating the need for new capacity in this new AWT treatment, then yes, the answer to the question is in the affirmative, that we can use impact fees, but they're limited only to the impact of the new growth, and they cannot be used to retroactively create capital projects that would improve water quality. So moving forward, yes, but going backwards, no.
Thank you both so much. Good questions. Okay, so please, as we go forward, continue to put your questions in that Q&A box. As you've seen, we're going to stop at the end of each section and answer them. But let's go ahead to our next section, where we're going to have presentations from various Sarasota County departments on the work that they've been doing over the last year to protect water quality. Public Utilities is going to get us started. Jill, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate it. As a matter of fact, let me turn down the. That's better. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jill Dahlman. I am a project manager of Sarasota County's Engineering Department in Public Utilities. For this webinar, I would like to fill everyone in on the utility's ongoing mission related to outstanding water quality for our community. The Director of Public Utilities, Mike Milek, is also here to answer any questions at the end of this webinar. But I'd like to start with what we were talking about earlier, and that's our commitment to AWT. I would like to begin by talking about the utility's commitment to an advanced wastewater treatment program, or AWT. In 2019, the utilities made the pledge to enhance the treatment processes and capabilities at all the regional wastewater reclamation facilities to include AWT. AWT is a complex treatment process that reduces the nutrients in the liquids found in the wastewater and enters a wastewater treatment facility. The main nutrients reduced are nitrogen and phosphorus. This is an important point for the treatment process. The liquids that enter a wastewater treatment facility are run through a complex treatment process and eventually become what is known as reclaimed water. Reclaimed water is widely used for irrigating our communities, golf courses, and parks. The runoff of the irrigation can enter our bays and estuaries, thus supporting the reason to reduce certain nutrients before they get into the beautiful waters of our community. Looking on the screen, let's talk about the first project. The Bee Ridge facility, the county's largest wastewater treatment facility, is currently under construction to convert to AWT and integrate a state-of-the-art membrane bioreactor, or MBR. When construction is completed, the efficient thin membranes of the MBR will help cut some of the steps out of the wastewater treatment process, increase the capacity of the facility by 50%, or bringing it up to 18 million gallons per day. And in conjunction with using AWT, will help the utilities deliver the highest quality reclaimed water to our customers. On the screen, number 2, the Venice Gardens facility in South County is currently under preliminary design for conversion to AWT and include MBR. In the future, the Venice Gardens facility should have the same benefits as the Bee Ridge facility. Number 3, work at the Central County facility, also known as CCU, must wait to begin until the Bee Ridge and Venice Garden facilities are completed. The reason is that the wastewater that normally goes to CCU would need to be diverted somewhere. However, we must wait until the other plants or the other facilities have been, the construction is completed and they are fully AWT facilities. Next slide, please. But before I continue, some of you out there may be wondering, what happens to all the wastewater collected? And what is exactly reclaimed water? Let me give a short explanation of this. When wastewater enters a wastewater treatment facility, the liquids and solids are separated. Now, it is at this point, the liquids move through yet another complex treatment process where the liquids will be brought back to what is referred to as secondary water quality standards. Hence, at this point, we now call the liquids reclaimed water. But where does the utilities hold all of the reclaimed water? I'll show everyone in the next slide how the utilities accomplishes this with the projects that are shown here in this slide. Next slide, please. Sometimes the utilities may have excess reclaimed water due to limited irrigation demands. The challenge is what to do with the excess reclaimed water. Where do we put it? One of the things the utilities does is to temporarily store excess reclaimed water in retention ponds around the county. But what do we do when there is a large amount of excess reclaimed water? Referring to the projects on our last slide and in more detail on this slide, here is how we strategically use wells to manage the excess reclaimed water. First, we have the Bee Ridge wastewater facility aquifer recharge wells. What's happened here is we take the excess reclaimed water that we have and pump it into an aquifer right below the Earth's surface to recharge the aquifer there. The next method is the aquifer storage and recovery, or ASR, permanent pumps and piping. Here we take the excess reclaimed water and store it in a quasi aquifer bubble where it stays until we recover and return it to a retention pond to use for future distribution. Lastly, we have the Central County Deep Injection Well, or DIW, pumps and piping system. Because sometimes when there is a lot of excess reclaimed water and we really have no more storage capacity, we take that water and we inject it deep below the Earth's surface. Look on the screen, if you will, and notice that the pipes are lilac color. Now, when you're around town, you'll be able to recognize which pipes contain reclaimed water. Next slide, please. The next venture the utilities keeps in constant motion is the Utilities Capacity Management Operations and Maintenance Program, also known as the CMOM program. The CMOM program was adopted by the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, and provides guidance and basic principles to public wastewater facilities on how to operate, maintain, and manage their wastewater collection systems. Some of the projects that come out of this program are cleaning and inspecting sewer lines, identifying any leaks, developing best management practices, continuous training and education of field staff on how to manage the wastewater collection system, and monitoring the levels of flows inside the wastewater collection system. All this is done to ensure proper capacity is maintained inside the collection system. Lastly, utilities operating procedures and asset management approaches are refined annually to optimize the lifespan of the collection system. Next slide, please. One of the vital portions of the CMOM program is the repair and refurbishment of lift stations, manholes, and sanitary sewer lines. The utilities currently operates and maintains approximately 752 lift stations. For general information, a lift station is fundamentally a wastewater holding tank or collection sump. Each neighborhood may have at least one lift station collecting the wastewater from all the properties within that area. Once the lift station volume of water collected reaches a certain point within the sump, a pump kicks on and the wastewater is evacuated to either a master lift station somewhere in the area or directly to a wastewater treatment facility. But because of the conditions inside of a lift station, it is important that all equipment and assets are maintained routinely. Maintenance can include covering the lift station interior walls with protective coatings, changing out the hatches, replacing pipes, valves, and pumps, and performing electrical upgrades. Lift stations are under constant observation and regularly being evaluated. Most lift stations are in good shape, but over the past couple of years, the county has rehabilitated 173 lift stations. On the screen, please take a look at the before and after photos. Quite a difference. Next slide, please. Lastly, along the same lines as the lift station maintenance program, another key aspect of keeping up the resiliency of the wastewater collection system is to continuously maintain the collection manhole structures and sewer pipes in the county to be sure they are safely performing and the outside environment is protected from spills and overflows from sewer lines. Although most sewer lines in the collection system are in good shape, we're happy to report that over the last few years, we have lined 3,181 out of 19,159 manholes and have refurbished 77 miles out of 805 miles of gravity sewer pipes. Now, at this point, this concludes the utilities presentation. Thank you for your time. Stay tuned for the next presenter coming up from Public Works.
Thank you, Jill. This is Amanda Boone, the Senior Stormwater Manager for Public Works and our Stormwater Environmental Utility. Now, the Stormwater Environmental Utility we talked about last year has in the past been primarily focused on flood control, but we are shifting that future focus to water quality. That's not to say we won't pay attention to where it floods, but now we want to pay attention to the quality of that water as well. Now, the program overall has a multitude of responsibilities. This includes our responsibilities to the city of Sarasota through an interlocal agreement, the maintenance and planning of our existing system, capital improvement projects, our development standards for new development, our National Pollutant Discharge and Elimination System permit compliance, the management of total maximum daily loads, and both our NFIP and CRS programs, which are associated with our floodplain management. Next slide, please. We have several water quality programs already in place. One of these is our aquatic weed harvesting. Now, we harvest those aquatic weeds because first, they can damage structures, block drainage, but they also pollute the water with nutrients when they die and decay. Now, the county is evaluating an expanded effort to remove aquatic weeds from our county stormwater facilities, as it may provide a very attractive cost-benefit ratio when talking about nutrient removal. We also have throughout the county several water goats, which are a clever name for those devices which trap and prevent our floating debris or trash from floating downstream to our bays. And lastly, our neighborhood environmental stewardship team seeks to educate the public at the neighborhood level and guide them towards best management practices to improve water quality and their communities. Next slide. Now, recently, there's been quite a few questions about, does Sarasota County monitor the water at all? Do you know what the water quality is? And the answer is yes. We have a substantial set of data that tells us what is going on our bays. And this information is shared with our other cooperating organizations and the public. So first, we have water quality monitoring of our creeks and bays. Our bay sampling sites are collected monthly, and they're analyzed by Mote Marines for 19 different parameters, including Carenia brevis, dissolved oxygen, nitrogen, total phosphorus, and chlorophyll A, just to name a few. Now, our creek sites are collected again monthly by VHB, and the TMDL sites are collected quarterly by stormwater staff. Now, these are analyzed for 22 parameters, including nitrate and nitrite, total phosphorus, biochemical oxygen demand, coliforms, and dissolved oxygen, again, to name a few. Next slide, please. Now, we have several biological monitoring programs as well, and the first of these is our seagrass monitoring. Throughout the county, there are 40 fixed sites and 120 random sites, and these are visited each year annually by county staff. Now, at each of these sites, we look at the presence or absence of seagrass, the percent bottom cover, the species abundance, blade lengths, whether the seagrass is covered in epiphytes, if there's macroalgae present, if there's rooted algae. The sediment types are water depth, clarity, and temperature. Next slide. We also monitor scallops. Now, these scallop sites are 15 fixed sites and 15 random sites, again, surveyed annually throughout the county by our staff. In the information here, we look at the number of adult scallops, their size, and the seagrass parameters I previously mentioned. Next slide. In conjunction with looking at the adult scallops, we look at the spat, which is the larval stage of adults. Now, this additional monitoring is done monthly. And what we do is in each of the 6 county bays, we have citrus bags that mimic seagrass, and they're deployed to allow the spat to settle in those bags. So we then collect them and analyze how many spat landed on that bag. Next slide. Lastly, for our biological monitoring, we have our oyster sites. Here we're determining the abundance of live oysters. These are 24 fixed sites throughout the county's tidal creeks, and they're revisited annually for that assessment, looking at the percent at each site that are alive, the average percent live across all sites, and what kind of habitat is existing in those creeks. Next slide. We also have beach monitoring, and we do this in conjunction with the Department of Health. There are 16 beaches in Sarasota County that are sampled weekly for Enterococcus bacteria. If a beach is found to have an unsatisfactory level, then it's resampled. If it once again is unsatisfactory, this is when the no swim advisory is posted, and that remains posted until a satisfactory result occurs. And that is based on, again, a repeated daily sampling. Now, the monitored beaches include Longboat Key, Ringling Causeway, Lido Casino Beach, North Lido Beach, South Lido Beach, Siesta Key Beach, Turtle Beach, Nokomis Beach, North Jetty Beach, Venice Beach, Service Club Beach, Broward Park, Venice Fishing Pier, Casperson Beach, Blind Pass Beach, and Minnesota Key Beach. Next slide. So what happens with all this data? So this is open to the public and shared on the Sarasota County Water Atlas. And this is where we store it, we present it visually, we analyze the trends, and really start to get an understanding of what is going on in our creeks and bays. Here you see two examples of how that is visualized and what kind of condition those areas are in based on the parameter being presented. Next slide. So for our creeks and bays, it's important to look at that trend. Dave Tomasco talked a little bit of the trend. Is things improving? Are they hopefully not decreasing or not improving? But that may be the case. And here you see those trend areas for each one of those categories. Next slide. Now, our seagrass is done in combination with the Southwest Florida Water Management District aerial mapping and seeks to support that data as well. So it is kind of a collaborative effort to where we are all making sure we have the best data when it comes to our seagrass coverage across the bays. Next slide. Our scallops and oysters over the last 2 years have had a significantly more spat landings, and it is not as high as 2015, which was the highest recorded, but we are seeing an increase. And our oyster monitoring has an average of 70% oysters found to be alive during our monitoring. Next slide. Now, since last year, we have completed a few projects. One of these is the Sarasota Watershed Management Plan, where we looked at this entire watershed for projects that provided an opportunity to improve water quality or eliminate flooding. We also updated our rate methodology for our stormwater assessments, making a fair and equitable way to make those assessments across the county. And lastly, we updated our countywide pollutant loading model update to provide the best possible information on where those areas are that we need to pay the most attention to in improving water quality. Next slide. We have several projects that are currently in progress. They are multi-year. The first of these is our Alligator Creek Stream Restoration Project, which is about 60% designed and will finish up within the next year. Our Philippi Creek Northwest Tributaries project is just kicking off into design. Donna Bay Phase 2 is currently under construction, and Donna Bay Phase 3 has entered the initial part of the study and design for that project. Next slide. Moving into the future, we are looking at projects that may include project management and retrofit, urban retrofits or low impact development. But what I'm really excited about is we will be able to put together a capital improvement project portfolio that shows the expanse of projects, their location, how much they cost, and what their benefits are throughout the county. And with that, I turn it over to our next presenter. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Rachel Herman, and I'm the Environmental Protection Division Manager in Sarasota County's Planning and Development Services Department. My team is primarily responsible for implementing environmental regulations, air quality monitoring and management, pollution response and recovery, and environmental planning and projects. We connect water quality in many different ways, which I'm looking forward to sharing with you more about that today. I wanted to start today with how environmental protection standards are applied during development. When new subdivisions or commercial operations are built, we require littoral, start my video. We require littoral shelves and ponds. These are areas of native aquatic vegetation that help improve water quality and wildlife habitat. We require tree planting during development, and when we have compliance cases associated with our trees code, those fees are generated for the purpose of planting trees on public lands. An example of this can be seen on North Cattleman Road at Nathan Venderson Park, or more recently at the Englewood Sports Complex. We require that developers monitor water quality associated with large-scale development, and native habitats are set aside as protected areas that must be managed with activities such as nuisance exotic vegetation removal. We recently adopted the Unified Development Code amendments that include pollution prevention requirements, and associated with that, we require that erosion control and pollution prevention best management practices are in place throughout the construction phase of a project. We conduct lot drainage reviews during building permit applications, and we have watercourse buffers and setbacks, including those along the Myakka River, which is a wild and scenic state designated river. We also promote the use of low impact design features such as cisterns and impervious paving. Next slide, please. Once a community is built, how we interact with our citizens and visitors is a big part of what we do. We partner with the IFAS extension on rain barrel sales, and in the year 22, fiscal year 22, we sold 315 barrels, which is about 75% more than we sold in the year before, which is awesome. We do targeted presentations to neighborhoods about ponds and those preserve areas that they may be adjacent to in their developments. And we hope those folks be good neighbors to those areas. We also do presentations to neighborhood groups about topics like illicit discharges and what to look for and what to report to us. And for example, we're having one of those talks planned for Siesta Key Association in January. We provide additional information at our educational opportunities such as the County Fair, Fire Fest, and Earth Day, and at libraries throughout the year. And we do targeted social media releases and neighborhood newsletters on various topics. We just did a recent one about tree permit requirements following the end of our storm season, and annually we remind our residents about fertilizer restricted season. One of the most important ways in which we interact with the public is one-on-one through our education during inspections. These can be very targeted topics and situations, and we hope to create more meaningful connections with folks that we can build on through the years. Next slide, please. We also do compliance inspections and enforcement when necessary. For example, we do each year about 15 sites that we work on with contractors to clean up those that have been contaminated with petroleum, such as leaking underground storage tanks. We inspect various sources of water pollution, such as storage tanks, as I mentioned, industrial facilities, and domestic wastewater facilities, such as package plants. And we regularly respond to ensure that best management practices are in place during construction and development. Annually, we respond to about 200 pollution referrals for things like illegal dumping and vegetative debris in stormwater drains. And of course, we do our best to coordinate with our partners in water quality, such as the Florida Department of Health, Florida Department of Environmental Protection, Southwest Florida Water Management District, and the Army Corps of Engineers. And our most important connections are to our citizens and visitors like you, and I thank you for being here today. This slide concludes my talks, and I'll be happy to turn it over to Brooke Langston with Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resources. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Okay, Sarasota County Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resources manages more than 50,000 acres, much of which is natural area. The most impacted program our department has for water quality is land acquisition. By buying and preserving land, we protect water quality. Slide, please. The Environmentally Sensitive Land Program was established in Sarasota County in 1999 using county taxpayer dollars to purchase sensitive lands within the county. This has exponentially added to the protected acreage we already had. Protected lands maintain or improve water quality in either a natural stream system, a recharge area, an estuarine environment, as well as providing wetland and floodplain protection and nutrient filtration. Slide, please. A critically important function of preserved lands is a holding place for rainwaters. Large tracts of undeveloped habitat allow stormwaters to slowly travel across the land before reaching our rivers, bays, and gulf. This allows time to percolate into our drinking water supplies and reduces the impacts of flooding nearby. These two slides are just from weeks after Hurricane Ian. The slide on the left, on the far side of the slide on the left, you see a row of what almost looks like crab trap buoys, but that's the top of a fence in our Walton Preserve parking lot. That fence is 7 feet high. So those buoys, that Walton Ranch is holding 5,000 acres times 5 or 6 or 7 feet deep of water for weeks after the hurricane. Similar to the slide on the right, which is at the Vanismayaca River Park. And that pavilion is about 15 feet high. So that's how much water the Carlton Basin was holding at that time. Slide, please. Two key management tools we employ on our preserved lands are prescribed fire and exotic plant removal. Benefits of fire on hydrology start with that layer of burned material on the ground after a fire that acts as a charcoal filter as the water passes over the land and passes through it. Percolation rates increase with regular fire on the landscape, and evaporation rates from the surface of the soils decrease. Surface runoff decreases, and post-burn rainfall saturation rates increase. Fire prevents organic buildup in wetlands, allowing them to stay wetlands and not turning into bogs. And fire provides recreational opportunities by keeping these wetlands open for canoeing and kayaking and birding and other outdoor activities. The benefits of exotic removal on hydrology include reducing water withdrawal through these non-native plants. Removing exotics increases hydrological flow and increases biodiversity of flora and fauna. Slide, please. Another key program in our parks is our ongoing goal to restore and enhance shoreline habitats to increase nutrient uptake and water storage by plants. Restoration projects in coastal parks and beaches present cost-effective, viable solutions to help with nutrient reduction and climate mitigation in our community. I'll highlight 3 large water quality projects recently at Blackburn Point Park. In the first, these slides show us building a living shoreline, a system of mesh bags of oyster shells stacked on top of each other to simulate a reef, in this case installed near some mangroves. These reefs are often built in conjunction with seagrass beds. These new reefs will provide erosion control, reduce wave action along the shoreline, which allows the native seagrasses to thrive, and they provide water filtration. These oyster shells provide an ideal place for oyster eggs to land and grow, eventually becoming a thriving oyster reef, which in turn provides a home to much small marine life in the area. Slide, please. We're also restoring the central area at Blackburn Point Park through the removal of invasive species and continued efforts of erosion protection with the shoreline, with the living shoreline going in here. Native trees were planted to help provide shade while stabilizing the shoreline. Slide, please. On Rattlesnake, whoops, we can go one more slide. There we are. On Rattlesnake Island, we are removing exotic vegetation and planting native species to strengthen shoreline stability and provide native habitat, which increases biodiversity. The surrounding water quality improves with habitat stability and biodiversity. Slide, please. Nearby, 150 native species were installed at Siesta Beach Access 7. These 150 trees were installed on about a half-acre area that had been previously invested with Kogan grass. The Kogan grass was removed, and these native plants were added to aid in water filtration and land stabilization. All of these programs and projects benefit from volunteer help, so please feel free to come out and join Sarasota County Parks in improving your open spaces and thereby the water quality surrounding it. Now I think we go back to Lee Hayes Byron.
Thank you, Brooke. That's great. Hello again. I'm Lee Hayes Byron, and this time I'm sharing about the work in my department of IFAS Extension and Sustainability. Close to all of our programs in Extension touch water quality in some way. Our Florida-friendly landscaping and Master Gardener volunteer-led plant clinics and demonstration gardens help educate the community on sustainable landscape strategies. Our commercial horticulture program reaches professional landscaping industry to ensure that they follow best practices as well. Next slide. We offer training for professional pond managers on a holistic approach to stormwater pond best practices. This will be adopted statewide soon as the Florida Friendly Ponds program. We also work with Sarasota County Utilities to educate on the nutrients that are already in the reclaimed water. Our bay-friendly fertilizing tool helps neighborhoods and turf managers and golf course managers reduce the amount of fertilizer that they need to use by understanding what's already in the water they're using for irrigation. Next slide. An important audience that we're going to be focusing more on in the coming year is homeowners associations. We provide pond consultations with site visits, and there's a potential funding for improvement. Out. We also provide neighborhoods with landscape consultations, presentations, site visits, and supporting the adoption of Florida-friendly landscaping within homeowners association common areas. And finally, we provide irrigation evaluations to help reduce nutrient runoff from overwatering. Next slide. Our coastal Sea Grant program focuses on reducing marine debris through presentations, cleanups, and youth engagement. They also train professionals on living shorelines and mangrove trimming best practices. And we work regularly with the county's solid waste department and their Keep Sarasota County Beautiful program with litter cleanups and increased recycling education. Next slide. The Florida Master Naturalist Program is a train the trainer model, helping professionals and volunteers learn how to do environmental education techniques, including multiple topics related to water quality. And then just last week, we just started our first of many field trips for this school year through our Learning in Florida's Environment program. We take 4th to 5th graders out to various parks across the county to introduce them to environmental science as well as STEM career opportunities. Many of them have never been to these parks, let alone done water sampling, animal adaptation lessons, and more that they get to experiencing these really fun field trips. Next slide. You may not be aware, but a significant amount of nutrients in our waterways comes actually from the sky in the form of atmospheric deposition. Pollutants from power plants and vehicles go into our atmosphere and then fall into our bays and creeks and contribute to water quality issues. Our sustainability program helps reduce that through education on electric vehicles and electric lawn equipment. In fact, the county is planning on adding an all-electric landscaping crew to its fleet next year. We also have electric vehicles in the county fleet and provide public charging stations at county locations. There is solar photovoltaic at 4 county facilities and a comprehensive energy efficiency program for both county operations and the community. Next slide. I want to end by mentioning some really important funding sources that are contributing to this work in future years. The voters recently approved a continuation of the 1 cent infrastructure surtax, which will include many water quality related projects. Similarly, the American Rescue Plan Act provided additional funds, some of which is going to water projects as well. So hopefully all of these presentations have given you the sense that there really is a comprehensive effort around water quality across all county departments. There will be a lot of work continuing and progress made in the coming years. Let's go to the next slide. And we're going to stop now and see what questions you have. Jackie, what do you have for us?
All right, give me a second to pull up all these wonderful questions from our audience. All right, so let's go ahead and start with this question from Grace. So, what experiments are now underway to encourage wide use of chemical fertilizer alternatives such as processed pelletized sewer plant sludge, commonly called milo-organites, on all lawns county-wide?
Organite.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Dave.
No worries.
Utilities, do you have thoughts on that strategy?
Yeah, currently in this area, we don't have a commercially available product like millorganite. We do, some of the vendors in this area produce a compost that's used on some of our athletic fields and some of the county properties. But we don't have a retail distribution network set up for a retail product such as millorganite.
All right, any other input from our panelists before we move on to our next question? Okay, so this question from Deborah and James Murray is, does the county have any plans to, 1, implement a residential septic system inspection program, 2, mandatory converting septic systems to sanitary sewers, and 3, diverting and treating stormwater runoff from streets before discharge into creeks, culverts, and waterways? So Jill and Mike, do you have any thoughts on that?
Right. The county just recently presented to our Board of County Commissioners our implementation plan for septic to sewer. Right now, we're still, as the commissioner said, we're still working on our outreach portion of that plan. The idea is that we want to get all of our facilities upgraded to advanced wastewater treatment before we undertake a program such as septic to sewer conversion throughout the rest of the county.
All right, great. All right, our next question is from Grace. So, enforcement of establishing and maintaining community stormwater pond shoreline buffers appears to be one huge part of controlling excess nitrogen runoff into the bay and Gulf waters. Is this being studied, discussed, evaluated as to size as a factor?
Hi, this is Rachel. I will say that the county has a voluntary 6-foot low maintenance zone that's strongly recommended but not mandated. And that would apply to any stormwater pond, stream, watercourse, lake, or canal. I'm just looking at the regulations here so I get it right. But there isn't a required buffer zone around those ponds at this point. So that might be something that IFAS is looking into. I'm not sure if there's being some additional studies done on that topic, but perhaps one of the other speakers could speak to the research that may be done on this.
Mike or Jackie, Mike D'Imperia or Jackie, do you want to talk a bit about the Healthy Ponds program?
Hi, I can actually weigh in a little bit on the research. A lot of the research that's done so far has been in the agricultural best management practices area, but there is currently research being done by the university right now to really quantify a lot of the effects of these buffer zones in more of a residential setting. I think that may be what Grace was asking about, so I hope that can answer your question there. We also do have a Healthy Ponds program, and as Lee Hayes mentioned, we have an upcoming Florida Friendly Ponds program. These programs are designed to teach people, specifically HOAs and pond managers, about these best management practices.
Thank you, Mike. Very well said. So on to our next question from an anonymous attendee. So is the tap water on Minnesota Key safe to drink? Would anyone know the answer to that? Or have any input in general?
If they're connected to the municipal water source through Charlotte County, then yes. All that water is tested and meets state and federal requirements. As far as the individual wells that may be servicing individual residents, local health department can assist with testing those.
Great, thank you, Mike. All right, so next question is from Phil. Do putting bags of oysters on the bottom along mangroves and possibly seawalls require permits?
Hi, this is Rachel again. Yes, they would. It depends on the nature of the shoreline restoration that you're doing. There might be a perched wetland planter option that could be authorized by staff, but otherwise putting the bags of oysters in those locations might require approval by the Board of County Commissioners. But we do always invite our property owners to reach out to us to talk about shoreline restoration opportunities, and we are happy to help, of course, with the permitting process to make that as easy as possible.
Thank you, Rachel. All right, so our next question is from Deborah. So Deborah says, I'm finding many homeowners who aren't aware of the summer restrictions on fertilization. Have you considered mailings to homeowners, particularly those near or on water? Also, why is the sale of fertilizer still allowed at this time, or even a sign required at sale sites stating the dates of restriction?
A lot of good questions in there. I will say that for the fertilizer restricted season, we do the targeted social media outreach. And of course, we do a lot of outreach through our neighborhoods program and the neighborhood newsletters. Those are delivered electronically. I don't know if we've considered doing mailings, but there is definitely a cost associated with that. We do have some research done about the sale of fertilizer. We can't restrict selling fertilizer, as far as I know. I think that's regulated by the Florida Department of, I'm going to get the acronym wrong. Somebody who knows it might be able to chime in, but if it's FDAX. But we have considered a sign, a point of sale signage during the fertilizer restricted season, which might be helpful. The problem is folks do have fertilizer in their garages and in their homes all year long, and that might be something that could raise awareness, but still might not prevent folks from applying it. Hopefully we can continue to get the word out and let them know about that fertilizer restricted season through those various means and methods.
Great, thank you, Rachel. All right, on to our next question. So this is from Vicky, and Vicky has a couple questions. So I'm going to go ahead and just read them in order. So Vicky's interested in the answer to Joe's question and the following two. So it would greatly help if CO, I'm assuming county, would review placement of required trees for new development, particularly oaks. This is my third community where oaks were planted in the wrong place, and the HOA and owners have to take care of the upheaval of sidewalks, broken pipes, etc. So more so than a question, she's asking, please incorporate this. Developers who planted these are no longer financially responsible when the trees become a problem. It's very expensive to take down these trees. So does anyone want to give any input to that before I move on to the second part of the question? Or
I can speak to that a little bit. We do have options for developers to propose alternative trees. They don't just have to be oaks. So if we identify an area where they're going to be planted that we know they're not going to mature to a size that is compatible with the surrounding infrastructure, folks do have the option to choose different tree types. So that is available to them now, but certainly a very good point. When we're doing our review of landscape plans and we're looking at those in the field, we do want to let folks know that they might be better off with a different species choice. As our folks in IFAS will tell you, right plant, right place is very important. And then moving on to the second part of the question, did you want to read that one aloud?
Right, yes. So Vicky continues, is there a dedicated pollution source reduction program? We did that up north a few years ago, and we were able to clean up lakes, etc. And then she says, thank you.
Okay, great. I'll speak to this one too. We do have dedicated funding that actually comes to us from the state of Florida, especially for the pollution cleanup that I mentioned with relating to petroleum. And our staff oversees the contracts that we have with various private entities that help restore the value of those sites, both that environmental value and the economic value, by removing that contamination from the soil.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Give me just one moment. All right, so Deborah and James checked in and just wanted some clarification on their earlier questions. So that is mandatory conversion of septic systems to sanitary sewers and diverting and treating stormwater runoff from streets before discharge into creeks, culverts, and waterways. So is that something that's on the table, or does anyone want to speak on that at all? And that's our only other question for the moment.
I'll touch on the mandatory connection to sewers. Right now, the county does have a mandatory sewer connection ordinance, so that if there is a sewer line in front of your house, you have to connect to it. But we're not pursuing the program for the septic conversions at this time. As I said, the board has asked us to make sure that the wastewater treatment plants are upgraded to advanced wastewater treatment before we undertake a septic to sewer conversion program.
All right, great. Thank you, Mike. And then Deborah and James were wondering about implementing a residential septic system inspection program.
All right, I'll touch on that. It's not in the utilities wheelhouse, but I'll touch on that a little bit. The Department of Environmental Protection is now the regulatory agency in charge of septic tanks, and they have evaluated in the past the idea of requiring a septic inspection program, but at this time, nothing has been implemented.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate your thoughts on the matter. And we still have a little bit of extra time. If anybody else has questions, feel free to post to the Q&A. And Lee Hayes, do you want to give that another minute, or would you like to move on to the next portion of the update?
I think those were really great questions. Thank you all very much for submitting them. And our respondents did a great job connecting the dots there. Thank you. I'm not seeing additional questions. So, one last question. Go ahead, Jackie.
All right. So are there county requirements for retention pond water quality? And this is from Scott.
Yes, there are. Our ponds, as they're going through development review, are required to meet a water quality treatment volume requirement.
Great. Thank you, Amanda.
Okay.
Right.
Great. Thank you so much, Jackie, for facilitating, and great questions, everyone. Our last session is about what you, our county's residents and businesses, can do to help keep moving our water quality in the right direction. Michael, you can go ahead and take it from here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Dampurio. I'm the Water Resources Agent with Sarasota County UF IFAS Extension and Sustainability. To wrap up today's water quality virtual update, we've identified 5 top action items for residents and businesses to improve water quality in Sarasota County. Many of you may be able to implement some of or all of these behavior changes into your everyday life. And by the end of the presentation, it's my hope that everyone will be able to commit to taking on at least one of these action items. The first action item that we've identified is to follow the 9 principles of the Florida Friendly Landscaping Plan. Florida Friendly Landscaping is a University of Florida standardized program that helps people make informed landscaping decisions that are eye-catching and beautiful while protecting Florida's natural resources. Florida Friendly Landscaping is based on 9 scientific-based principles that largely work to reduce the use of water, fertilizer, and pesticides, which saves you, the consumer, money, helps keep nutrient pollution out of our water, and they can be designed for low maintenance and to be aesthetically pleasing. Next slide, please. So we are going to open up a poll here just now. Yep. So if everyone can take the time to just glance over the 9 Florida-friendly principles and take a moment to commit to which one, if any, you will be able to implement over the next year. Okay, and Jackie, if you want to lead us on the poll whenever that's ready.
We still got answers coming in, but I'll wrap it up in another couple seconds.
Mhm. Okay, great. It looks like we had a lot of responses here, and the majority, just over 50%, chose that they would either water efficiently and or fertilize appropriately. That's fantastic. Those are two heavy hitting areas when we talk about ways that you can improve and maintain water quality as a resident or a business owner. Next slide, please. Irrigation is another area where we could stand to make some improvements. Upwards of 50% of a home's potable water use can be spent on irrigation alone. That's quite a staggering statistic. Sarasota County Extension and Sustainability has information and resources available to help you reduce this water footprint. First link that we have here on your left is for our irrigation restrictions. Our irrigation restrictions are changing starting with the new year, so on January 1st, 2023. Outlined for the new restrictions are going to be moving away from the old system into a new system where people will have 1 day a week where they can irrigate their lawn based on the ending letter or the ending number of their address number. So on Mondays, people who have an address that ends in 0 or 1 will irrigate. On Tuesdays, those whose address ends in 2 or 3 will irrigate. Wednesdays, 4 or 5. Thursdays, 6 or 7. Friday, 8 or 9. And Saturday is reserved for areas with no address. This is to include common areas, development entrances, medians and roadsides, clubhouses with no addresses, and recreational elements. Sundays are reserved for no watering, so please give it a break on Sundays. You can follow the link under the picture of the irrigation timer for more information. Rain barrels are another great way that we can reuse free rainwater. Rainwater can be used to water any of your non-edibles. Here at the Sarasota County UF IFAS Extension and Sustainability Office, we offer free rain barrel workshops. The workshops are free to attend, and rain barrels are included for a cost of $23. And that cost includes all taxes and fees. So if anybody is interested in signing up for such a program, the link is located underneath of the picture of the rain barrels. Testing your sensor is another great way to save water in Sarasota County. Rain shutoff sensors are required for all irrigation systems. Often the case, however, is that these sensors are a bit out of order and not functioning properly. So to check your sensor and to get a link to a video that has helpful hints on how to do so, you can follow the link under the picture of the irrigation sensor. Another great way to minimize your water input is to schedule an irrigation evaluation through the Extension office. Over the past year, we have saved over 1 million gallons of water through irrigation evaluations. The irrigation evaluation is a full examination of your irrigation system that will check for function and efficiency. After the irrigation system is thoroughly examined, we will provide you with a personalized list of recommendations for retrofits to your system. Next slide, please. We're going to open up another Zoom poll to ask what is wrong with this irrigation rain sensor. So if you can take just a moment to answer the poll, I'd like to see what you can observe. Okay. And again, Jackie will let us know whenever we have answers coming through.
Yep, we're at a 17 so far, but I know we can get more than that, so. All right.
Okay, do we still have answers coming in, or are we sort of at a stall? Great. Okay, so this was actually a little bit of a trick question. The correct answer is all 3 of the answers So the roof is obstructing the rain sensor. You can see that the eaves of the roof are hanging over the sensor. That's going to block any rain from entering the sensor and therefore shutting it off. The sensor also appears to be old and likely not functioning. This is something that we see pretty typical when we go out to evaluate sites. And the irrigation sensor is also missing a couple pieces. We also have sometimes seen irrigation sensors where the wires are just completely cut and missing. Next slide, please. Managing nutrient runoff. Excess nutrients are a large form of pollution that can contribute to poor water quality. We heard a lot about this through some of our previous speakers. So a great way that you can help to minimize this issue is to follow Sarasota County's guidelines and regulations and refrain from applying nitrogen containing fertilizers from the time period of June 1st through September 30th. Please be mindful also of the amount of nutrients that are still present in your reclaimed water. We did hear a bit about this through our talks from utilities. So reclaimed water, you can almost think of as free fertilizer. There are residual nutrients that are present in that irrigation water. To help you quantify this, we do have a handy nutrient calculator. I believe Jackie has already put the link to that calculator in the chat for everybody to access. The nutrient calculator helps residents and business owners calculate the amount of nitrogen that is being applied to turf through reclaimed irrigation. This allows you to make informed decisions about supplemental fertilization. So if you are already adding small amounts of nutrients through your reclaimed water, it is likely that you can reduce or eliminate your amount of supplemental fertilization. You can also work to improve soil quality by adding natural compost and keeping your grass clippings. A great way to improve water quality is to keep your grass clippings out of the street, out of the trash, and just compost them right back into your soil to help build up that organic material, retain moisture, and help your grass thrive. You can maintain a fertilizer-free zone. This is something that we highly push for, to maintain a fertilizer-free zone of at least 10 feet from all of your water bodies. That includes lakes, streams, creeks, and stormwater ponds. And we also ask you to manage other sources of nutrient pollution. So some very common sources of nutrient pollution that we may not think of are pet waste, yard debris, and our aging septic tanks that we did hear a little bit about already. Next slide, please. Will you commit to any of these bay-friendly fertilizing practices? We're going to open up another poll for you here. Okay, just take another minute. Please answer that poll question for us. All right, so we have the answers in. We have a pretty even split here. It looks like a lot of people are willing to commit to cleaning up their pet waste. That is a great way to maintain water quality by eliminating nutrient pollution and also by keeping possible pathogens from entering a water supply. So if you're to do nothing else, that is a great place to start, is just to pick up after your pets. Thank you. Next slide, please. Stormwater ponds are the major way of maintaining water quality here in Sarasota County. We have resources and information available at the Sarasota County Extension and Sustainability Office. We offer classes, presentations, and resources to HOAs and residents about stormwater pond best management practices. And as Lee Hayes mentioned earlier, the Florida Friendly Ponds program from the University of Florida will soon be available to help teach about these best management practices. One of the best things that you can do for stormwater pond health is to implement a buffer zone around your stormwater pond. Next slide, please. Here we have some examples of buffer zones that we've seen throughout the county. If you could please take a second and just look at each of the 4 options of typical buffer zones and indicate which of these ponds you would most like to live near. Okay, we see that we have some ponds where the turf goes right up to the water's edge, not much of a buffer zone there. We have option number 2. It looks like that pond has a lot of growth going on in there. Option number 3, we have a tall unmowed section or a buffer zone around the pond's edge. And option number 4, it looks like there is an assemblage of native plants, grasses, and trees that are planted around the pond's edge. Thanks for participating. It looks like the majority of participants, 58%, chose pond number 4. That's great to see. We really do advocate for those no mow zones and buffer zones. Buffer zones can be more than just no mow zones. If you're interested in going the extra mile, you can put in an arrangement of native plants and trees. Option number 3, which is the typical no mow zone, that is also great as well. That can help to really promote water quality and help to maintain your pond. It looks like 42% of the respondents chose option number 3. Thank you very much for your input. Next slide, please. One of the best things that you can do to improve water quality is to get involved in your community. So at the top right corner, we have a link to all of our classes here about water quality and water conservation at the Sarasota County UF IFAS Extension and Sustainability Office. Under that link, we do have Lake Watch. Lake Watch is a UF citizen science lake monitoring program that facilitates active citizen participation in the management of Florida's lakes, estuaries, rivers, and springs. It's also one of the largest lake monitoring programs in the country. On our left, we have a list of several of our wonderful local organizations that offer not only resources, but also opportunities for engagement and volunteerism. Next slide, please. We're going to open up one more poll to see if you're willing to take a water quality commitment. So if everyone can take just a moment to go over poll number 5, please. We did touch on all of these options through the latter part of the presentation today. The poll is asking if you will create improvements on your Florida-friendly landscape, if you have an irrigation system and will definitely get an irrigation evaluation, if you will use our bay-friendly fertilizing tool. Again, the link to that is in the chat. There are stormwater ponds in your community and you will work to enhance them. We here at the Extension Office can provide you with plenty of resources and educational programming for that as well. And if you will become a neighborhood leader on water quality issues, this is something that we recommend to everybody. We have some fantastic programs here that are meant to do just this through our Master Naturalist class and our Florida Water Stewardships class. You can sign up and learn all about how to be a steward and a leader in your community. Great, it looks like we have a lot of people willing to commit to improving on their Florida-friendly landscape. That comes tied in with people who are willing to become a neighborhood leader on water quality issues. Those are 2 fantastic ways to really improve and maintain water quality here in Sarasota County. Thank you. Next slide, please. Water quality resources. If you're interested, this QR code and link here will take you to Sarasota County's water quality page, which has even more resources and information available for you. Next slide, please. And resources from our partners. Lastly, here are even more resources that are available through some of our amazing community partners. We've heard about some of these resources already, like the Water Atlas and the Water Quality Playbook. I'd also like to take this opportunity to highlight some resources for possible grant funding for some qualifying neighborhood stormwater quality improvement projects. Those include the Sarasota Bay Estuary Program's mini grant program, which can be used for bioswales, rain gardens, and diverting downspouts away from impervious surfaces. START, or Solutions to Avoid Red Tide, offers grant funding for littoral zone plantings in eligible communities. And the Sarasota County Neighborhoods Initiative Grant offers grant funding for protecting water and energy resources and native plants and animals. Those are all fantastic opportunities, and we have some additional resources listed here for you as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to open up to questions and answers.
Thank you, Michael. So Jackie, do you have questions for Michael's presentation or just final questions for our speakers?
All right, so we do have one from Joe, and that is, will the current weekly water requirement of 3/4 of an inch change in 2023?
No, that will not change.
All right, our next question is, oh, no longer relevant. Holly was just making a comment on some background noise, but all right. Now, Scott was wondering about water chemistry requirements as a follow-up to his last question. So give me a moment to pull that back up.
I think that was about stormwater funds.
So county requirements for retention pond water quality, but in particular, the water chemistry.
So through the design of ponds for new development, I mentioned there's a required water quality treatment volume. But if you're referring to, is there a requirement for them to test for particular parameters such as nitrogen or dissolved oxygen? No, that is not a requirement.
All right. If you have any other questions, now is the time to post them to the Q&A. I'll let you know if anything else comes in, but right now we are clear for questions.
Thank you so much, Jackie, and thank you everyone for the really good questions. This is exactly what we were hoping for, getting your input, hearing your priorities. I think that's really been clear in the Q&As, so thank you so much. We will keep track of all the questions that were asked. All right, I'm not seeing anything else come in, so I want to end by just saying that I know this was a lot of information and a long webinar, and I really want to thank you all for joining us today. With the critical importance of water quality to our community, we think it's important to ensure that we keep you, our community, updated on the latest science and county initiatives, and we give you the opportunity to ask questions of us to provide information on what's going on. Remember, you can always find more information at scgov.net/water quality or call 311. The materials from the webinar will be on the website soon, so watch for an email from us with an evaluation to share with us your feedback, as well as links to additional resources. Let me take a minute to thank all of our speakers. There were a lot of us today and put a lot of work into this, so thank you for your work. Thank you for joining us on this presentation, but really thank you for the efforts to protect our community's water quality. And mostly thank you to our participants for taking such a big part of your day today and for putting so much of your passion into this important issue. That's all I have, and I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to say thank you and have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you for hosting this.